Look, Batman, why are we fighting? We're on the same side.
You wear bright colors and love to help everybody. I am the night. I embrace darkness. And I really love to punch people.
So you're saying that because we both have different brands of justice that we can't get along?
Exactly. It's because you're... What are you doing?
Oh, sorry, I'm running late for work. I've got to get to the Daily Planet as quickly as possible.
Oh, okay. Hey, where did Superman go? I was just talking to him.
World's greatest detective, huh?
Yeah, so? Wanna fight about it?
Hey everybody, I'm excited! Why am I excited? Because today I checked out Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice! Yay! So Batman vs Superman, as I'm going to call it because Dawn of Justice is just way too long, is a DC Comics blockbuster action movie directed by Zack Snyder. It stars Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Jesse Eisenberg, Amy Adams, as well as a ton of other people. So the movie serves as a sequel of sorts to Man of Steel from 2013, but is also a prelude to a Justice League movie which is coming up in a few years' time. The story starts off during the end of Man of Steel, where Superman is fighting General Zod in Metropolis, and of course all hell is breaking loose, buildings are falling over, things are exploding, and a lot of people are getting killed. One of the people taking this personally happens to be Mr. Bruce Wayne, who has a building in downtown Metropolis that, well, let's just say it doesn't exactly fare too well in the big fight. Bruce Wayne just happens to be a vigilante named Batman, I'm sure you already knew that, whose brand of justice is a little bit rough to say the least. Superman doesn't agree with Batman's rough brand of justice, and Batman doesn't agree with, well, Superman, being that he's a godlike alien with powers that could destroy the world in a heartbeat. So therein lies the conflict between the two characters. In this universe, we're also introduced to Lex Luthor, who just happens to be finding a way that he could defeat Superman, which is basically his MO forever. And he also happens to be fashioning a creature of sorts to stop Superman in case Batman can't get the job done, fashioned from, well, let's just say something Kryptonian from the first film. Now, before I get too deeply into things, I just want to give a little bit of my own personal history here. I grew up on DC. My earliest memories of childhood were dressing up as Batman, my sister as Wonder Woman, running around the garden playing superheroes. I grew up on superheroes, but I was always leaned more towards DC. I liked Marvel, but I loved DC. Batman and Superman were my big heroes growing up. So as you can imagine, I've been anticipating this movie big time. Back in 2007, we were given our first glimpse into the possibility of a Batman-Superman movie with Will Smith's I Am Legend. In the post-apocalyptic environment, we actually had a shot of a Batman-Superman poster together up on a marquee. And that sparked tons of rumours. Were we ever going to see this movie? One of my best friends ran a comic book shop, and we used to have so many discussions about the possibility of a Batman-Superman movie. And finally, it's here. So like I said, I was fiercely anticipating this movie until the last couple of days when a lot of early reviews have been coming in from screenings. And, well, to be honest, they have not been favourable. In fact, a lot of them have been downright harsh and negative. But in a way, this was a good thing, because I kind of had high expectations for the movie, so the reviews and everything that I've been hearing helped to distill those expectations. And to be honest, I went into this movie thinking I might not even like it that much. There were some really bad things I was reading, and quite frankly, I didn't like the sound of them. So anyway, I sat down for the 2.5 hours of this movie, and, well, I gotta say, I didn't actually mind it. It wasn't that bad. Look, it really has its problems in a big way, but I was satisfied. I actually walked out thinking to myself, you know what? I'd actually see it again. So let's go into the good, the bad, and the ugly of Batman vs Superman. Alright, first of all, the good. Oh my god, Ben Affleck. He freaking is Batman, okay? Ever since day one, years ago, when it was announced that Ben Affleck was going to be playing this role, the internet exploded. So many people were comparing it to Daredevil, which, okay, that movie kind of sucked. But because of that, people were saying, oh, you know, he can't play Batman, he's going to be terrible. I actually really thought, no way, he is the perfect choice. He's got the build, he's got the jaw. The dude just looks like Bruce Wayne. And look, I don't think he's that bad an actor, to be perfectly honest. But actually watching him in action in this movie, man, he far surpassed my expectations of what he was going to be like in this role. It wasn't just him, it was the costume, it was everything. He was the best on-screen Batman we have ever seen. I'm not kidding. Yes, better than Adam West. Tim Burton's Batman in 1989 introduced us to the black rubber, leather, whatever you call it, costume, and from there, that's all we got as far as the big screen Batmans go. This time around, we're back to the grey costume with the black cowl and cape and the symbol. There's not a lot of colour going on, we don't have a big yellow symbol, or we don't have nipples on the suit, thank God. And it was really similar to the Batman we had in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, which was arguably the greatest Batman comic ever written. Aside from Ben Affleck, I've got to really hand it to Gal Gadot as well as Wonder Woman. Granted, her character, well, at the Wonder Woman version of the character, we didn't really see too much of in the movie, but what we did see, oh man, it left me wanting to see a Wonder Woman movie so much, and thank goodness we are getting one very soon. And she was actually somebody who I was pretty skeptical at first. When they first released pictures of her, I don't know, I thought maybe she looked a little bit frail to be playing Wonder Woman, but no way, she pulled it off big time. She was amazing. Even in her role as Diana Prince, when she's in her civilian clothing, you know, she actually really did a good job. She kept her Israeli accent, which I found a little weird at first, but yeah, it grew on me. I didn't mind at all. As I mentioned in my previous review for Man of Steel, for that movie I thought the special effects could have been better. Well, for this one, they've definitely been improved. They were much more convincing this time around. Admittedly, there were a couple of things that were still not quite right. The Doomsday Creature, which I'll get to a bit later on, it was passable. But aside from that, the rest of the effects were, yeah, bang on this time. Which leads me to the action sequences. Wow. I mean, let's face it, you're going into a movie called Batman vs. Superman, you want some pretty hardcore action, and this movie had it in spades. Not just the fight between Batman and Superman, but a lot of the other action sequences as well. Really top-notch stuff. In my review for Man of Steel, I also kind of criticized Lois Lane's role in the movie, where I thought she was kind of underused. So this time around, naturally, I was really hoping that we would get a bit more from her character. Did we? Yes and no. She still kind of played a little bit of a damsel in distress role a bit too much, but she did serve a purpose in the story. Now, here's where the big problem with the movie lies. It's near impossible to talk about without revealing spoilers. I'm never going to reveal spoilers in my reviews of movies, but man, this time around, there's some stuff that happens in this movie that is really difficult to not talk about. Anyway, suffice to say, Lois, yeah, she does kind of play a role in the emotional impact towards the end of the movie. Her relationship with Clark is really broadened in this one, and yeah, it does serve a purpose in the film. As I've said before, I'm a fan of 3D movies if they're done right. The 3D in this movie, it wasn't great. I don't think you really need to see it in 3D. The opening scene was very impressive, and I was actually sitting there thinking, okay, if it keeps it up, we are in for a really good 3D movie here, but save for a few shots here and there, which looked a bit impressive, overall, it's not necessary. Since we're starting to delve into things that were wrong with the movie, let's cut right down to it. The biggest problem this movie had was that it was two movies. That's right, it was two movies put together. And I'm not just talking about the running time. To be honest, the running time I didn't even notice. But it really felt like they could have actually split the story into two separate parts, had the Batman vs. Superman stuff, and then some stuff that happens at the end of the movie should have been a different movie. And again, it's really hard to talk about without giving anything away, but something really important happens in the third act, which was a major storyline in the comic books, and they should have saved that for another movie, and I'll tell you why. Because they've marketed this movie as Batman vs. Superman. I mean, it's in the title. We're there to see a big action movie, a fight between these two Goliaths. But then all of a sudden, we get this third act, and it's kinda, sort of gone in a bit of a different direction, and it should have been more emotional, but we're sort of left on this high from, you know, from the big fight scene and all that sort of stuff, and I didn't feel as emotionally invested in the ending of the movie as I should have, as I wanted to be. As for the fight scene itself, which is basically the center point of the movie, it was a little bit of a letdown, only because the actual way that the fight is set up, I thought maybe they could have done better, but the way the fight ended was lame, to be quite honest with you. But the fight itself was nothing short of spectacular. I mean, when Batman comes out in that armor that we've seen in the trailer, oh man, you could not wipe the smile off my face. It was intense. Seeing these two going at it with each other, seeing them throwing each other around, that kind of thing, seeing Batman like using his gadgets and his brains to overpower Superman. Yeah, it really was everything I could have hoped for in the actual fight. And look, realistically, I think it went long enough, but that being said, I think some people are going to be disappointed because they might be expecting that the entire movie is going to be centered around the fight scene, which, yeah, is a little bit misleading. Now, while I said before that I didn't feel the running time was an issue with the movie, and yeah, I really didn't feel like 2.5 hours had gone by, at the same time, they could have realistically trimmed maybe half an hour or so out of the movie. There were some scenes that I thought were unnecessary, and there were a few things that happened in the movie that I didn't think were explained well enough. A few things just seemed to be a bit convenient. And I'm pretty sure I was paying attention, but yeah, there were a few things that I was kind of scratching my head thinking to myself, okay, I don't know how that happened, but it happened. Okay, let's just see people beating each other up. As I said before, Doomsday I wasn't completely convinced about. He looked okay, he was passable, but Doomsday is actually a really significant character in the Superman comics, and I thought they could have actually done him a bit more justice. No pun intended, but while it's out there, you got it. Now, as I said in my review of Man of Steel, I was a little bit on the fence about the darker tone, the style of Man of Steel, and of course it was carried over into this movie, which it was a little bit more welcome being that we've got this gritty, brutal Batman in the film as well. But at the same time, something occurred to me while I was watching this movie, one of the reasons why I don't agree with the darker tone. Back in the 70s and 80s when we had the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, growing up with them as a kid, look, I wanted to be Superman. I watched those movies and, oh my god, I had to be Superman. Some people to this day might accuse me of wearing Superman costumes. Yeah, so. Anyway, watching this movie, it occurred to me, you know, if kids watch this movie, which realistically is questionable because it was extremely violent, would they want to be Superman watching this film? I'm not entirely sure. He doesn't really give kids any reason why they'd want to grow up to be Superman because, you know, he is still kind of a scowling, grouchy character in this. But this time around, his personality kind of suited the movie because this movie's set in a world, a broken world, where people are not too sure if the idea of having a Superman around is a good thing because of the destruction in Metropolis and that kind of stuff. And, you know, they're really questioning his place in the world, which in turn makes him question his own place in the world. And that again makes the Lois character serve a bit more of a purpose because she kind of helps to ground him a little bit. Now I'm going to get to the thing that I hated most in this movie, and that was Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Wow. It was going to be really difficult from the trailers to tell which way his character was going to go. After we'd been given Michael Rosenbaum's portrayal of Lex Luthor in Smallville, which was absolutely fantastic, now we're given this guy who kind of reminded me of a toned down version of Jim Carrey's Riddler from Batman Forever. You know, he was just this crazy kook of a guy who had all these kind of twitchy mannerisms and stuff, and aside from the way that he was played, the character was just written badly. He just didn't serve much of a purpose in the film. He was there basically just to kind of bring in something that people needed in order to stop Superman, and realistically that was about it. Now Lex is to Superman what the Joker is to Batman. You know, he's like his number one arch nemesis. And yeah, the fact that he was so badly underused in this movie, I really was against. And like I said, the way that Jesse Eisenberg played him, I really felt like I was watching a bad audition tape. I'm not kidding. When you're watching a good performance, you know, the actor transcends who they are and they become the character. Not this time around. It was just like watching Jesse Eisenberg reading some lines, and I was not convinced for 1 second that he was Lex Luthor or that he was a force to be reckoned with. Now, the final small gripe that I've got with the movie is the way that they're ushering in the Justice League. Like I said, this movie is a prelude to a Justice League movie, and let's face it, it's hard to not compare the way that DC is handling their franchises to the way Marvel did it. Now, in 2008, Marvel released Iron Man. Following that, we had movies of the Incredible Hulk, we had Thor, Captain America, and it all led to the Avengers in 2012. And they introduced smaller characters in the individual movies. It was done brilliantly. By the time we came to the Avengers, we knew who everybody was. So DC are trying to imitate this model, and while I could say that they got it right, being that, you know, I'm yay DC, yeah, they kind of forced the rest of the Justice League on us in this movie, just in small parts. Like, we didn't really see too much of them, but I really felt it was forced. Rather than, you know, maybe just having Wonder Woman in this movie and then in her movie introducing another character, that sort of thing. In this movie, we got some glimpses of a few other heroes, but I really don't think that cramming all these heroes down our throats at the moment is really a wise idea, and it really didn't work for me. Okay, so look, it seems like I've actually pointed out a lot more negatives than I have with positives in the movie. Well, yeah, maybe I did. I still really enjoyed it though. And I don't know if it's that I'm biased towards DC or whatever, or, you know, maybe it was just that dream of finally seeing Batman and Superman in a live action film together. But yeah, I didn't mind it. I think the critics are being a little bit too harsh on this film. And keep in mind, a lot of talk is going on at the moment about the score on Rotten Tomatoes. The last I looked this afternoon, Batman vs. Superman was on a 35%. For those who don't know, Rotten Tomatoes, it basically aggregates scores from film critics around the world. It takes all the positive reviews, the negative reviews. So when you get a score like 35%, that means that 35% of the reviews have been positive. Now, look at it this way. Sharknado is on, I believe it's 82%. Sharknado has, I think, less than 20 reviews, and the ones that are positive, they're saying things along the lines of, well, you know, it was a crap movie, but hey, for what it is, you know, I had a laugh out of it, that sort of thing. That's considered a positive review. So Rotten Tomatoes isn't really a good way to gauge a movie. So look, go into this movie with an open mind, okay? Just keep in mind, it does have its problems. It is two separate movies stuck together, and, you know, but while it does have these problems, my God, see it for Ben Affleck. You know, he really nailed that role, and he truly was the most perfect Batman we've had on screen. As much as I love Christopher Nolan's Batman, played by Christian Bale, you know, he was good for those movies, but this time around we have got the true comic book Batman that we've never seen on the big screen before, and yeah, it was worth it just for that performance. So, despite a world full of critics who are giving this movie an absolute boot up the bum at the moment, I am going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. So anyway, that's what I thought of Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Hey, I hope you do like it. I'd love to know what you think, so like I said, drop me some comments because this is Movie Talk. I like to talk about movies, and I'd love to talk about movies with you. See you next time.